Steve thought he was just celebrating his last night of freedom, but fate had a twist in store. Buckle up. This story is juicier than you think. Steve was getting ready to go to his bachelor party. He and Amaka had already done their court wedding, and the church ceremony was set for the next day. They had been dating for just 4 months, and Steve, feeling the pressure of waiting, admitted to Amaka that he was incredibly horny. But Amaka stood firm. "You've waited 4 months, Steve. You can wait a few more hours," she said. She let him go to the party but gave him two strict rules: no alcohol and no strippers. At the party, a girl tried to dance with Steve, but he wasn't interested. His friends Ted and Rob teased him, saying it was just a lap dance and Amaka would never find out. But Steve stood his ground. "I have to follow my wife's rule," he said. "Test me however you want, but I won't break my promise." He even compared himself to Jesus, reminding them how Jesus fasted for 40 days and resisted the devil. Meanwhile, Steve's sister Nia decided to spend the evening with Amaka, assuming she also had a party. But she was surprised to find Amaka alone. Amaka explained that all her friends were in the US and couldn't make it. It was just the two of them. Amaka asked if Nia found her boring, and Nia joked that she was just intense. Then Amaka asked what she thought Steve was doing at the party. Nia laughed. "Knowing your friends, they've probably got him drunk and he's getting a lap dance already." Amaka was shocked. The scene then shifted. Steve was lying on a bed, and a stripper named Cleopatra was on top of him, kissing him. Later that night, Amaka couldn't sleep. She was worried. Steve wasn't answering her calls. Nia told her not to worry, maybe he passed out, and reminded her that Steve was a grown man. But Amaka kept trying. Steve eventually woke up next to Cleopatra. He was shocked. He couldn't remember what had happened. At that moment, Amaka showed up at the house. The place was a mess. Rob and Ted were passed out, strippers around them. When Amaka opened Steve's door, she found him half-dressed in bed with Cleopatra. Furious, she walked away. At home, Nia was waiting when Amaka returned and started packing her bags. Steve begged her to stay. "I don't remember anything," he said. But when Amaka asked if he had slept with the stripper, Steve admitted he didn't know, but suspected he had. "You cheated just because you couldn't wait a few hours?" she asked, and then she left. "Don't come after me." Steve called and left her voice notes, apologizing, begging to talk, promising it would never happen again. But Amaka ignored them. He went to see Rob and blamed him for getting him drunk and ruining his marriage. Rob said he shouldn't worry. They'd find Amaka. He also said Cleopatra wasn't the kind to sleep with anyone, unless someone paid her well. Maybe figuring out who paid her was the key, but Steve was focused on getting his wife back. Days later, Ted called Steve, saying he saw Amaka at a hotel. Steve rushed over. Amaka tried to leave, but he stopped her. He begged for forgiveness. "It meant nothing," he said. "I don't even remember it." But Amaka wasn't interested. Steve fell into depression. He started drinking again. Nia noticed and called their mother. "He's back to drinking," she said. "He needs you." Steve kept trying to reach Amaka, but she dismissed him at every turn, even throwing water in his face once. His mother finally stepped in. "Give her time," she said. "Amaka loves you. She'll come back. But first you need to pull yourself together." Just as Steve was preparing to return to work, he opened the door, and there stood Cleopatra, bags in hand. "I'm pregnant," she said. "My boyfriend threw me out." Steve was shocked. "We only had a one-night stand. You're a stripper. You've slept with other men." But Cleopatra insisted. "I haven't slept with anyone else in 6 months." Steve had no time. His secretary called. He had a client waiting. He told Cleopatra she couldn't stay and promised to find her a place. On the way to work, Steve called Nia and asked if Cleopatra could stay with her. Nia refused. She had exams. He tried his friends, but there were no available houses. Back at home, Cleopatra got busy. She cleaned the house, bought groceries, even cooked. When Steve got home, he was amazed at how spotless everything was. He checked the cupboards, then found a pot of food. As he reached in, Cleopatra stopped him. "Yours is in the fridge," she said. "Go freshen up. I'll warm your food." After showering, Steve sat at the table, staring at the food. Cleopatra noticed and tasted it herself. "See? Not poisoned." Steve thanked her and said he couldn't find her a house. She could stay, but they had to keep out of each other's way. The next morning, Cleopatra made breakfast. Steve ignored it. She asked for his number in case of emergencies. He gave it to her. Later, Amaka returned to pick up groceries. She heard noise from the kitchen and found Nia eating straight from the pot. Nia was stunned. "Who are you?" she asked. Cleopatra introduced herself. Nia warned her, "You've already caused problems. If my mom finds you here, you're finished." But Cleopatra said she could handle herself. The two eventually bonded, danced to music, and had fun until Steve walked in. Furious, he told Nia to come to his room. "She's a prostitute," he said, but Nia defended Cleopatra. "She's a stripper, not a prostitute, and she's fun, not uptight and boring like Amaka." Steve got angry and kicked her out of his room. Later, while eating, Steve thanked Nia for the food and laundry, but she told him it was all Cleopatra. Steve turned and thanked her. As she walked past, he found himself admiring her. The next morning, Steve caught himself staring at Cleopatra again. She noticed and said, "Your breakfast is on the table. I packed your lunch too." Steve then told her he was sending her to his private doctor for a pregnancy test. She agreed, but looked nervous. At work, she called him multiple times, but he ignored the calls. When he returned home, his mother was waiting. "Why didn't you tell me about the girl?" she asked. "This house is cleaner than when Amaka was here. She's a keeper." Steve was stunned. Then Cleopatra walked in with juice, calling him boss. She played the part of a maid perfectly. Steve pulled her into the kitchen. "Why did you do that?" he asked. Cleopatra said she had to improvise. He wasn't picking up her calls. Steve then told her the test results confirmed she was pregnant. "I don't approve of your work," he said, "but you have good values." Cleopatra told him dinner was ready. Cleo was on a phone call with her daughter the next morning, unaware that Steve was eavesdropping from the hallway. Her voice was soft and filled with emotion as she told her daughter how much she missed her. She promised she was doing everything she could to raise money for her school fees and would visit soon. But when she turned around, her heart skipped a beat. Steve was standing right there, furious. He asked her why she lied about not having children. Cleo sighed deeply. She explained that she had just turned 17, eager to join university, when her sister died, leaving behind a newborn. She took in the baby, and with support from the baby's father, she managed until he too passed away a few months later. Left alone with the child, Cleo had no choice but to balance motherhood and studies. When life got too hard, a friend introduced her to stripping as a way to survive. She said she sent the baby to live with a cousin so that she wouldn't grow up thinking it was normal for her mother to be a stripper. Steve then asked her why she was still stripping even after finishing university. Cleo said she had applied for jobs everywhere, but no one would hire her. Her dream, she admitted, was to own a restaurant that served traditional meals. Steve, smiling for the first time, told her that her food was the best he'd ever tasted. They started bonding. They laughed together, shared stories, and watched movies late into the night. Steve offered to pay her daughter's school fees, but Cleo refused, saying she didn't like handouts. She'd work and provide for her daughter herself. Meanwhile, Amaka, Steve's wife, visited a church. The priest advised her to forgive Steve, but she said she wasn't ready. Still, she agreed to visit him. One evening, Cleo surprised Steve wearing her stripper outfit. She teased him with a lap dance, but he pulled away. Laughing, she said she was only joking and asked for his opinion on the outfit. She had a gig that night. Steve then told her he'd found an apartment for her and she would be moving out soon. To celebrate, she gave him a playful lap dance. That's when Amaka walked in. What she saw shocked her. Cleo on Steve's lap. Without giving them a chance to explain, Amaka stormed out. Steve chased after her, trying to explain. He swore he hadn't touched Cleo since she moved in. But Amaka was livid. She said Cleo was pregnant and living under the same roof as him. She promised that, for the emotional damage Steve caused, she would destroy him and take half of everything he owned. Later, Cleo found gifts Steve had bought for her. One of them had a card that read, "I will miss you." It moved her to tears. The next day, as she prepared to leave the house, she found Steve drunk and depressed. He finally opened up, confessing a terrible secret. Years ago, during a heated argument, his ex-girlfriend had picked up a knife to stab him. In self-defense, he pushed her. She slipped, hit her head on the bed frame, and died. His mother had told him to lie to the police and avoid prison. That's how he stayed free. And that's why he rushed into marrying Amaka, to bury the past. Cleo comforted him. She said he did what he had to in order to survive and offered him support, and told him to call if he ever needed her. But before she could walk out, Steve asked her to stay the night. Later, Cleo received a call. Her boss told her to leave the house as planned, but Cleo said her plans had changed. She was staying. What she didn't reveal was that her boss was Ted, Steve's longtime friend. The next morning, Steve woke up with a thong on his head. Confused, he wondered if he had slept with Cleo. He found a letter beside him and read it, a smile creeping across his face. But the mood was shattered when he received a package. Divorce papers from Amaka. He told his mother, who was furious. She said Amaka could never take half of the inheritance, not while she was still alive. But Steve confessed the truth. Amaka knew about his ex's death and was blackmailing him. His mother went to speak with Amaka, but Amaka was cold and defiant. She said she left London to marry Steve and wasn't leaving empty-handed. Days later, Steve ran into Cleo. She had moved out but hadn't moved into the apartment he got her. He asked if she'd been ignoring his calls and attending her checkups. She dodged the questions, saying she was just busy. Steve told her the divorce settlement was approaching, and Amaka wanted a house, half his inheritance, and a stake in his business. If he didn't comply, she would expose his past. As Steve prepared to sign the agreement, Cleo and his mother burst into the meeting. Cleo dropped the bomb. She wasn't pregnant, and they had never had sex. She revealed that during the bachelor party, Steve was drugged by Ted. He blacked out and kept calling out Amaka's name all night. Nothing happened. She then connected the dots. Amaka had introduced Steve to Ted, her late uncle's former employee. Ted was a known pimp and had paid Cleo to seduce Steve, pretend to be pregnant, and eventually blackmail him for a mansion and $1 million in cash. Cleo exposed everything, even that Amaka wasn't her real name. Her real name was Isani. The lawyer was her sister, and she had been running the same scam with multiple men, marrying them, then blackmailing them into divorce settlements. Amaka denied nothing. She coldly said she had proof of Steve's past and would take everything unless he cooperated. But Cleo stood up to her. She had evidence, contacts, and the testimonies of other victims. She threatened to bring them all forward if Amaka didn't walk away quietly. Amaka, defeated, agreed. After the confrontation, Steve was furious with Cleo. She confessed that at first she followed Ted's orders, but over time she fell for Steve. She had to know the kind of man he really was. Steve told her he had started falling for her too, but now he wasn't sure if he could trust her again. Days later, while going through some of his books, Steve found a letter Cleo had left for him. The next day, he went looking for her. Cleo was surprised to see him. She told him she had left the stripping job and was now working at a small local restaurant. Steve handed her a check for $5 million to start her dream restaurant. He told her she didn't need to pay it back. He admitted he missed her. It was scary, but he'd rather be with her than live without her. At that moment, Cleo's daughter came home from school. She recognized Steve immediately. When Steve asked how she knew him, the little girl said, "Mom talks about you all the time." Cleo smiled. She stepped closer, and as the story closed, Cleo accepted to be with Steve. They embraced, a hug full of healing, forgiveness, and a new beginning. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.